velvet alibi at the balcony. You don't notice a balcony door until it stops doing what a door is supposed to do. Ours had always been obedient, gliding shut on a whisper, locking with a soft click you could feel in your teeth. The night it refused to seal, I stood there with my palm flat on the glass, and my forehead picking up the faint scent of someone else's cologne drifting in with the sea air. A trace of cedar and darker things, the kind of fragrance that belongs to a man who calls himself a gentleman and believes it twice as hard as anyone else. Max, Lena's voice floated from the bedroom, warm, smooth, familiar. You gonna make that door jealous, or come to bed and make me jealous instead? The joke was her from head tilt to grin. I loved that about her, how she wore ease like a silk robe. I also knew, with a cold clarity I wasn't used to, that the cologne on the wind hadn't come from me. Sticky latch, I said. I'll oil it in the morning. I slipped beneath the sheets and let her fold into me. Lena was beach salt hair and olive skin, and a laugh that could servo a crowded room in our direction. She managed PR for a boutique hotel brand and could spin a disaster into a story about resilience so beautiful you wanted to buy too. We met 3 years earlier when I pitched renovations for one of her hotels, a catalog of light, edges, warmth. I designed staircases that made people feel taller. She said I designed desire for a living. I laughed because I liked the sound of it in her mouth. We were good, mostly. Or I believed we were, which is not the same. The next morning while she showered, I checked the balcony. The lock worked. The track was clean. On the railing, a sliver of red thread lifted and settled in the breeze, a tiny banner from some invisible nation. I pinched it between my fingers. It was satin, rich, expensive. Not Lana's ordinary, not mine either. Yoga at 8, she called. Coffee. I'll grab one on the way to the site, I said, and pocketed the satin like a man who has just shot a starter pistol in his own head. There are neat ways to confirm a suspicion. There are also ways that gnaw you down to a shape you used to fit into denial. I picked the neat ones. I checked our shared calendar and found a new color block, burnt cherry, labeled simply breathwork, recurring, twice a week, location, variable. The hotel app on her phone had new favorites with names that side, the Aria Pavilion, Noonlight Suites. I told myself it could be business. PR uses rooms the way chefs use knives. Then the neighbor upstairs, Mara, stopped me in the hallway to hand over a wrongly delivered package, a velvet box with a satin ribbon in the same red as the thread in my pocket. The label was from Mason Delphine. I forced my voice to casual when I said I'd take it down. "You two going to the rooftop tasting tonight?" she asked, leaning against her doorframe. I liked Mara. Everyone did. She was the kind of woman who made a plain t-shirt elegant just by standing still. A photographer by trade, she lived in light and captured it for a fee. A quick smile, messy bun, forearms dusted with flour from a loaf she'd been coaxing into existence. I hadn't noticed her noticing me before. Now I noticed that she noticed everything. "We might," I said. "Depends on her breathwork." Mara's eyebrow rose slowly. She didn't push. "Well, if not," she tapped the box with her nail, "tell Lena her taste is improving. Delphine seems no more about secrets than people do." It was the most beautiful warning I've ever heard. I took the box inside and set it on the kitchen island. The ribbon tried to come undone on its own. I didn't touch it. I left for the site visit, and pretended concrete and measurements were enough to occupy a mind that had started treating reality like stage dressing. At lunch, I stepped into Delphine's boutique under the pretext of looking for a gift. The assistant gave me the kind of mercy a trained salesperson can dispense. No lingering, no questions too bright. I said my wife liked refined. She smiled and showed me a slip in carmine satin, cut on the bias to make the air lean. "Will this work?" I asked. I wasn't sure what work meant. "It's made to be seen," she said, and added carelessly, like gossip between saints, "We sold one like it last week." The client was nervous the way people are when they want something twice, to be noticed and to be forgiven. I bought nothing. I left feeling like a man who had touched a mirror and found it warm. By evening, the apartment smelled like her favorite candle, fig and smoke. Lena was in a black dress that allowed itself to be a suggestion more than a statement. She looked like a secret I had already memorized. When she leaned in for a kiss, I could taste mint and the afterecho of something sweet. Her phone lit up on the counter. BREATHWORK, RESCHEDULED. And a name I didn't recognize, C. "See," I said. "Caspian," she answered almost before the question finished, leaving me. "The instructor. He's brilliant. You'd love him." I smiled until my cheekbones ached. "The sea has a personality now," I said. She laughed, grateful for my deflection. "Be nice." We didn't go to the rooftop tasting. She said she was tired. I stood on the balcony with a glass of water and listened to the city breathe. Below me, light spilled from Mara's windows. She was editing. I could tell by the way color flickered across her walls. Music rose, soft, slow, something French that made the hallway smell like butter. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't have saved. A text, no greeting. "If you want the whole picture, don't chase shadows. 10 a.m. Saturday. Aria Pavilion. Room 407. Bring the part of you that likes clean lines." I stared at the message until the words stopped behaving like letters and felt more like weather. Then I wrote back, "Who is this?" The dots pulsed, then vanished. No answer. The air held its breath. Saturday, I went. I won't pretend I wrestled with ethics all morning. I made coffee, I ran, I showered. I dressed like a man who can accept the truth without denting it. In the Aria lobby, everything gleamed indecently. The elevator mirrors showed a version of me with his jaw doing something it hadn't practiced since college, clenching hard enough to leave a mark. Room 407 opened before I knocked. Mara stood in the doorway, barefoot, hair up. A camera strap crossed over one shoulder like a diagonal promise. She wore a plain silk shirt, and the red I'd seen in the boutique now hung from a chair in the room behind her like a tongue of flame. I forgot how to arrange my face. "You." "Me," she said. "And before you ask, no, I'm not sleeping with your wife or her breath coach. This is work." She stepped aside. "Come in, close the door gently. We'll keep whatever's left of your dignity intact." I stepped inside. The room was bright with that hotel light that improves skin and memory. On the desk, a receipt folder with my wife's handwriting on the signature line. On the bed, nothing but the austere triangles made by housekeeping. The red slip on the chair wasn't new. It had the weary glamour of a garment that survived a confession. "How do you?" I started. "No," Mara gave me the kind of look that's not unkind and not patient either. "Because people leave traces, Max. They put their stories on timers and imagine the timer will hold them. Lena hired me last month to take brand-friendly lifestyle content of this room for the hotel's socials. She brought Caspian to consult on wellness positioning. He kissed her neck when he thought I was swapping lenses." She shrugged lightly. "I've seen 1,000 kisses through glass. This one wasn't gentle. It was a thesis." I didn't realize my hands had curled into fists until she touched my wrist, and the motion calmed without my permission. "You brought me here to tear me down gently?" I asked. "I brought you here because I live across from your balcony," she said. "And I watched you for 3 nights in a row stand and touch the door like a widower. I don't like secrets that make neighbors into ghosts. And because," She lifted the receipt folder. If you're going to walk into your own life, it helps to do it eyes open. How long? I asked. Mara's gaze held mine with a steadiness that didn't steal anything. Long enough to believe there's a pattern. Short enough that if you stop it now, you get most of yourself back. She didn't tell me what to do next. She handed me the folder. Inside was an invoice, 2 nights last week at a discounted rate, the very rate Lena had bragged to me about securing for influencers. The signature was her flourish. Beneath it a note, breathe better, stay longer. L. There are men who rage. There are men who leave. I discovered I was a man who plans. When I left the hotel, I didn't go home. I went to the florist on the corner that knows more about apologies than the people who deliver them. I bought peonies because they open dramatically and roses because clichés are sometimes clarifying. I bought nothing red. I picked up pastries from the bakery where Mara buys her flour-dusted mornings. Then I made calls, first to a friend at a small magazine Lena respects, then to my lawyer, then to my mother, who said I sounded like a person who had found out Santa is complicated. She said to breathe and meant it without quotation marks. At dusk, I set the flowers and pastries on the island. I set the receipt folder between them as if it were another kind of food. Lena came in 15 minutes later, flushed, glowing like vindication. Surprise, she said, taking in the feast. What did I do to deserve? Arya, I said, and the word sat on my tongue like an oath. Room 407, tell me a story. It would be easier on us both if she had denied, if she had armored up and made me the villain of her drama. Instead, she sat on a stool, folded her hands, and told the truth like a knife. It wasn't supposed to be this, she said. He made me feel present. I felt like a room with windows on 3 sides. With you I always feel safe, warm, held. And then suddenly I wanted to feel dangerous again. I kept thinking if I could put it in a box, it wouldn't touch the rest. You did put it in a box, I said, tapping the receipt folder, and in a slip. She winced. I was going to tell you, she said, which is one of those sentences that thinks it's mercy and is. I even thought maybe opening things would be healthier than hiding. You don't ask for permission after you leave the house, I said. You don't open a window and then pretend the wind didn't lift the papers. She looked at the pastries like they might teach her something. I don't want to lose you, she said. You already did, I said, and the gentleness in my voice surprised us both. The days that followed weren't cinematic. There was paperwork, and dividing a life requires a mathematics you do mostly in the dark. Who takes the plant that refuses to die? Who keeps the ladder to change the bulb? We did it quietly. We laughed once, which felt like tribute and grief. I didn't tell Mara everything. She already knew enough. But we found each other in the hallway and then in her kitchen and then on her balcony one night when the air smelled like rain and fig. The city light folded around her bare shoulders. She poured wine and slid onto the railing as if she could convince gravity to flirt. I'm sorry, she said after the first sip. Not for telling you, for being part of the day you became someone new without asking to be. I was overdue, I said. Sometimes a door sticks because you stopped asking it to work. We didn't hurry. We didn't perform. She stepped closer and touched my jaw with those photographer hands that understand angles. When we kissed, it was slow, a quiet that traveled. Her lips tasted like blackberries and apology and something unnameable that might be hope. The kiss never asked for proof. It didn't need to go anywhere to be enough. We breathed against each other like people who had both had to relearn the verb. Want to see a trick? She whispered later inside in the wash of her editing monitor. It's my favorite. She pulled a sheet from the dryer and snapped it into the air so it fell around us like a white tent. We stood there, world muffled, faces close, the cotton warm against our shoulders. Her hair brushed my forehead. We laughed like thieves. I pressed my mouth to the place where her pulse answered mine and felt the kind of heat that doesn't need a witness. On my side of the sheet, I told her about staircases and why some steps make people feel like their legs belong to forgiveness. On hers, she told me about light and how a certain hour lays its hand on you and refuses to leave. When we dropped the sheet, the room looked the same. We didn't. Lena moved out at the month's end. We cried, each in our own careful way. She asked if I would hate her. I said no. She asked if I would be okay. I said I already was, which wasn't true and then was. Caspian sent me a message. I hope there's compassion in your practice. And I deleted it without answering, not out of anger but to make room. I kept the balcony door. I oiled it until it learned to be itself again. Sometimes at night, Mara sits on the railing while I stand behind her with my hands at her waist. The sea air comes in, the city murmurs, her laugh sketches a promise on my shoulder. We keep it YouTube safe, as my friends joke when I tell them I'm happy. It suits us. The erotic isn't always a flame. Sometimes it's a room at dusk, a breath at your ear, the long patience of two people who aren't afraid to stop before the edge because there's time to cross it later. And on the nights when wind slips through, the door clicks shut the way a heart does when it knows what to keep and what to let go.